not on the West Coast. I want to thank everyone for joining in on this webinar. It is, in fact, my acknowledgement to this is my very first webinar. I'm finally catching up with the times, I guess. My team has been trying to get me to do this for a while, and so now today is the day one of doing it. So here we are. So we have a really action-packed time of this 45 minutes. I want to make the most use of it. I want to go through just some, I feel like we want to go through some topics that we get a lot of questions about right now. And we get a lot of questions, obviously dealing more so with the election right now. But we want to focus on topics that we feel are going to be timeless, and not necessarily timely. And that just means something that we believe repeat as the years go on, and focusing on, like, as we approach fourth quarter. So even next year, you can look at the same thing. So we want to start off focusing really on a brief introduction of myself and the firm Resilient Wealth Management. We're then going to pivot to talk about some of the year-end tax strategies and what you can be doing as we finish this year. We'll also look at market volatility and portfolio rebalancing. That's a key part, just thinking about right now where things are in the market, how they've been going. We'll talk about how to plan for the new year. And that's just really going to be focused on, like, goals and things like that. And finally, the conclusion. We'll have a few minutes for some questions and answers and some discussion. And then we'll wrap it up with some closing remarks. And then we'll sign off from that point on. So let's get into it. Again, my name is Brandon Dixon-James. Again, thank you for joining. I am a certified financial planner. I have been in the industry now for 20 years. It's hard to believe it's been 20 years, right out of college. And my office is based out of Fresno, California, which is almost like the dead center of California. And I would say that our client base is concentrated in California, and then we have some exposure out in throughout the country. I've been independent now as an independent financial advisor for about 11 years, 11 years. And my wife and I started the firm Resilient Wealth Management really about 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago. She is not a financial planner, but she is my life and business partner, and we make a great team. But our firm was really started with the idea or the principle that your financial life isn't about failing, because we all make mistakes, but it's more so focused on how you get back up, hence the name Resilient. We're really passionate about our community impact. So not necessarily what we do in the office, but also how we impact just the community. We're really big on financial literacy in the underserved communities, and really empowering people with financial education. We believe knowledge is power, and the more you know, the better you're going to do. Like I said earlier, I made a lot of financial mistakes in my life, and if I can encourage someone with sharing my experience, or even empower them with education, I'm very fulfilled in that. I actually was just sharing with my wife the other day of how much I love what I do. I get up every day with intention and purpose. I love working with people. I love being a resource to people. Ultimately, I love making a difference in this world. We have, here we're very fortunate to have a really good team. So it's not all just me you're working with, or you see me on the screen, but there's a team behind me that really makes the magic happen. Again, as I'm the president of Resilient Wealth Management, my wife sits as the vice president of the firm. And then we have Abigail, who's the client and operations manager. And Edith is also on the operations side, and soon to be marketing as well. She does a really good job in that area. But ultimately, we have a really good team. We all work together very well, really just to make things happen. So even though you may end up or just see or talk to one person, it really is a team that's behind all this that works together. So let's get into it. Now I've got the introduction, and where we want to start now, we're really talking about some of the, again, with the year-end strategies, and focusing on even taxes, because we really often underestimate the impact of tax when it comes to investment returns, income, property sales, etc. And so what we want to focus on, especially as we wind down the year, let's take a look at those. Let's highlight a few of those tools that can help really minimize your tax liability if you have the opportunity to do so as we end the year. First off, I cannot stress the importance of having a handle on your taxable income as well as your deductions year to date. That's something that, it's really important to know. If you're a business owner or an independent contractor can be, you could be an employee with some side income somewhere, but it's important to know your P&Ls or profits and losses. It's important to know those as you go into the year. Because as you approach the year end, there may be an item, if you're a business owner, you've been holding off on buying a new vehicle, and hold off on buying some supplies, furniture, whatever it may be, but there may be an opportunity to purchase those before the year end, and that can be a write-off for that year. And those items can be a big ticket item, like I said earlier, such as a vehicle, or even something as small as a computer or a chair for your office or something along those lines. So it doesn't have to be big, but it can be an additional write-off that you could use to help minimize your tax liability. You may also want to make a donation. This is for anyone. You may also want to make a donation. There's always fundraising events at the end of the year, and that's perfect for those individuals, those companies, or even corporations who want to write those big checks. It's funny, I always laugh about this time. All of my kids' schools, sports sports activities and their school activities, they all have these fall fundraising, events. It's perfect for the end of the year and perfect for those people trying to, get that additional tax deduction. So now, if you are a salary or W-2 employee, your situation may not call for much strategizing as we approach the end of the year. You may have already taken some of that, you may have already done some of that planning earlier on in the year when you did your tax returns. You either got a refund or you owed money. And if you owe too much money, I'm sure your accountant or someone recommended that you start making estimated payments. So that's some of your tax plan that you may be looking at that you may have done already for the year. You may also want to keep in mind that tax laws do change. They change from time to time, and you want to be on top of those and how it impacts your specific situation. The last major tax change that occurred came in 2017 with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And that was, and I think some people did see some tax advantages in that time frame, but those are slated to expire in 2025. So you want to make sure you're on the lookout of what those changes may be if they expire. I know with any new administration that we get, there's going to be some changes that they're already proposing. So you should be working closely with your accountant or doing some research, making sure to see how those changes can impact you. Okay, so now we want to focus on the second bullet point, which is tax loss harvesting. This is sometimes referred to as the silver lining strategy, which I'll explain in just a moment. But let's really get an understanding of what tax loss harvesting is. It's a strategy that we look at. Let me go to the slide here so that way we can follow that there. It's really when you combine your investment gains with your investment losses with the intent or objective to reduce or eliminate your tax bill. And for those who don't know, or if you know, in a non-retirement account, when you sell an individual stock or mutual fund and you make money on it, so you sell it at a gain, you're going to owe Uncle Sam taxes on that capital gain, excuse me. And so it's great when you make money, it's great when things happen that way, but you will owe some taxes. Now, let's flip that. So on the other hand, it works the other way as well. So when you sell an individual stock or a mutual fund or an investment at a loss, that can become a deduction for you in that year. And that's called a capital loss. On the side note of that, you may pay taxes on whatever amount of gain you have. But on a loss, there's a limit on that. You can only reduce your losses, or you can only take a loss up to $3,000 per year. So you have your gains, which you can take unlimited amounts, but losses, you can only do $3,000 per year. So that's really where the goal of that is. So that's why we always say tax loss harvesting can be referred to as the silver lining in it all, silver lining in a strategy. Because when you think a year when the market's down, like I give you an example, it's the financial crisis or 2022, those were great opportunities. Although the market was down, it was negative. You saw, your balance being reduced by the market volatility. There was also a good opportunity to look at, okay, I can take a loss and now maybe offset a gain. So you're really being able to take that loss, you're selling that loss, and then if you are an experienced investor or a seasoned investor, you probably have some gains you've been holding on to as the years have gone on, but you just couldn't sell it because of the tax bill you didn't want to create. So now you take these losses in that year and offset the gains with losses, and you're able now to reposition your portfolio and pay less to Uncle Sam. So I call that the perfect marriage, when you can offset your losses with your gains and you minimize what you are giving to Uncle Sam. But I know that's a very technical term, and that's a strategy that we use for our clients when that time does come, focusing on tax loss harvesting in a down year like that. So that's why I call it the silver lining. So when the market's down, all is not lost. There's still some opportunity that we can be looking at. So going back now to the third bullet point, which is maximizing your retirement account contributions. And so when we look at the retirement account contributions, there's so many different avenues and different ways that we can do that. Let me just see here. There's an important note that some retirement plans do require that contribution to be made in that tax year. For example of that, or to take the deduction. For example, you have a 401k plan at work. You have to take your 401k contributions, you have to make those contributions in that tax year to receive a deduction. So if you made a 401k contribution in December of 2024, that will be deducted in 2024. If you made a 401k contribution in February of 2025, that contribution will be deducted in 2025. And so that's how like a 401k plan works. So let's look at another example of that. Let's look at like an IRA or an individual retirement account, not associated with your employer. Like an IRA, a SEP IRA, a Roth IRA, different things like that. But let's look at an IRA, for example. If you make a contribution in your IRA account, $5,000, and you make that in March of 2025, you can actually take that deduction for the year prior, which would be the current year right now, 2024. So just kind of give you an example of how some plans require you to make those contributions in that tax year, while other plans give you a little more flexibility. Again, an IRA, a Roth IRA, a SEP IRA. If you're a business owner, you have like again the pension plans, defined benefit plans, etc. So you have a little more flexibility in those different kind of plans depending on what your status is or what your how you're categorizing yourself. So and when it comes to IRAs, there's different contribution limits and different contribution amounts that you're able to put in there, and it all varies. I don't want to get too deep in the woods on that right now because there's income limits, there's contribution limits there, and it can be confusing. So if you have a question at the end, I'll be happy to take that question for you to really cover those limits and how that all works. Okay. So just as an FYI, as a reminder, at the end of this, we will have some time to have some questions and answers and go through some of the more specific questions if you have them, or you can always feel free to email us as well. So on the last topic, last bullet point here is we want to cover our year-end strategies in charitable giving. Some people give because they're charitably inclined, and others give because they can receive a tax break. Regardless of the reason, it is a tool that you can use as we approach the end of the year. The most common form of giving I would say we usually would be directly giving to a charitable organization. Sometimes it's a church or religious organization, or a professional or community organization, or like I alluded to earlier, there's always fundraisers that you can donate money to as well, and again receive those tax breaks. In giving in those forms, you don't necessarily, but when you give to the church, or when you give to a community organization, or different, another nonprofit, you don't necessarily have control over where those proceeds are going. But the idea of it is you support their objective. And some people, if they want to have more control, there are other strategies to use. And so we look at those as donor advised funds. And then the acronym for that is DAF. So let's see how donor advised funds work. Let me go to that screen really quick. So in a donor advised fund, you have the ability of either you're the donor pulling the money together in a fund, or in a donor advised fund, or a DAF. So when you pull the money together into a donor advised fund, you are teaming with other people, and you are going to put it into a fund. So you're pulling that money together, and you're going to go into a fund, and that fund is going to have an objective, and you select that objective and how you want that investment to go. Now, if you want to have more control of that, and you say, you know what, I really want this school, or I really want this to be the benefit of it, you can create your own donor advised fund. You can focus that donor advised fund on a scholarship. You can provide a scholarship. You can create a scholarship in someone's name. It can be for community improvement. It can be for sustainable energy, impact investing, which is a pretty popular term right now. It really is up to you and how you want to create that. Again, both options do offer those, but again, creating your own fund gives you just more control and more say in how that goes. When you pull the money into a fund together, it's not as much work. You just find the strategy you like or that you want to support. You say, okay, here you go, fund. I want to support sustainable energy. That's the direction you're going. You put into that fund. The funds you get a tax deduction immediately on that, and the fund works, and it goes to the institution, and they send it to the beneficiary there. Or again, if you create your own strategy, which is a little bit more work, but if you wanted to have like a scholarship in someone's name, or you wanted to you have a little more say in who the recipients are, that's really the benefit of creating your own donor advised fund, and then working with a school or working with an organization who can support that. But it does give you the most control over your donation in that sense of it. So that's really the strategy on why people like the donor advised funds, especially as we look at the end of the year. Again, you're going to hear a lot of topics really focusing on like impact investing. Okay, perfect. So now that we have really went over and talked about some of the year-end strategies, even dealing with tax planning, let's shift our focus now to market volatility and what that looks like. Let's talk about the stock market, and specifically, we really want to focus on just that volatility and some of the portfolio rebalancing and what that looks like. But first, let's really get an understanding of market volatility. And before we go there, let me just address the hottest topic right now that I hear of, which is, how does the election impact the market? And my answer is, overall, it doesn't. It doesn't. Historically speaking, the stock market is driven by profits and losses of underlying companies. I did some history back to, again, not the longest, but back to 2000. I looked at President Bush when he came in. He was reelected in 2004. President Obama was elected at the lowest, one of the lowest points of financial crisis, reelected in 2012. President Trump came in 2016. President Biden in 2020. In all of those different scenarios, they couldn't have any further policies or viewpoints But the market did not respond negatively to any of those different elections. What the market actually did respond negatively to in those times, you have the 9/11 incident, you have the financial crisis, you have the European debt crisis that happened. More recently, we had COVID and the inflation in 2022. So the market responds really to its event driven. So when you have events like those events, the market really had a negative impact in those times, but not necessarily dealing with the presidential elections. So I would say we have to take off our political lenses, our biases, and really focus on, again, the bigger picture and the history of the market, and really helps us manage our expectations, especially given today. So let's talk about market volatility in general. It's a very normal thing, going back to the history of the stock market, going to the history of the stock market. As long as it's been around, volatility has been a major part of it. One of the things that I always say is volatility really creates some opportunity. It does create fear. It does create uncertainty. But in the end, it also creates opportunity. So I'm going to show you this slide here, and I'll come back to this page. But I'm going to show you this slide and take you through just a few of the years that we're talking about. And I'll start off with the year even 1980, which is the year I was born. But what it really focuses on or highlights is captions that in 1980, the market ended positive 21%. So the blue lines represent how the market ended. The blue bars represent how the market ended. And you have a number on top of that bar, and that shows you the positive, how the market ended positive. That orange triangle, or that orange square diamond down below that, represents how low the market got during that year or that point in time. So again, in 1980, the market ended positive 21%. But at some point in time throughout the year, volatility happened and it dropped down 16%. That was the max drawdown that year. Okay, let's look at 2008. There was another, so just go down the line here to 08. We all familiar with financial crisis. Again, the market ended down negative 42% that year. Financial crisis, a really tough time. The max drawdown that year was down 51%. That's a significant loss that year. And let's focus on 2020. That was when we had COVID hit. So something a little more recent. As you see, that blue bar represents, market was up 14%. When COVID hit in February and it really hit the US, the market was rocked in a period of about 6 weeks, down about 34% in a matter of 6 weeks. And we saw a significant recovery back up positive 14 by the end of the year. That was just incredible. Again, looking at 2022, just one more example of that is where the market was end up down. This was inflation. Market was down 19% at the end of the year, down to max of 27. So just giving you the example of how market volatility is normal. That's just part of the history of it. So I always say it's one of those areas where it's not the idea of it is not to always, look at the fear and uncertainty, but look at the history of it. Someone always said, I've never seen the market go down and not recover. Warren Buffett, the greatest investor of our time, always talks about, be fearful when everyone's greedy and greedy when everyone's fearful. So it just tells you that, again, when you look at the market itself and investing, opportunity is created in these moments. And I always say market timing is very difficult. There's no perfect market timer. If I was a market timer and I was good at it, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I'd be on somewhere in the floating in the yacht in the Caribbean, or somewhere where it never gets hot, never gets cold, the bluest water I could ever find. And I would be there. I'd spend my life there, probably jet setting to different islands that no one can ever see me. So I laugh, I joke when I say that, but market timing is very difficult. And I think, I don't say impossible, but just very difficult to do. And so that's not my investment philosophy that I like to use, not focusing on market timing. But what I want you to focus on, get from this bullet point is, next time you see market volatility, take that fear. You can't get rid of it, but I want you to really think about this conversation and change that fear to excitement because now opportunity is knocking. The objective of investing is to buy low and sell high. And the only way that can happen is market volatility when things shift. So when that market goes down again, that is a buying opportunity. And when it comes up, look at selling. That's just the basics of investing successfully. So now let's talk about the importance of diversification, having a diverse portfolio, asset allocation. What does all that even mean? And so when we look at diversification in portfolio, it's just the idea of it is we're trying to, there's 9 different style boxes. You have growth and value and core and large companies and small companies, international companies, domestic companies, and a mix of it all. And so when we look at that, that's the style boxes that we're trying to build. Do we have a tilt in one direction and do we overweight in another direction? That's all what you're trying to look at when you build a diverse portfolio. And so we're looking at, I use the example, it's almost like football or cooking, but I'll use football for me. And thinking about, I'm not a Chiefs fan, but I know he's popular and everyone knows about Patrick Mahomes. But you can't have a bunch of Patrick Mahomes on one team. It just won't work that way. He's a quarterback. So you have a quarterback, you have to have a receiver, you have to have a person who's going to catch the ball, you have to have a running back who's going to run the ball, you have to have a blocker, you have to have someone consistent, like a Travis Kelce. You have to have a full team, and then you have a defense that's going to help stop the opposing team. And that's diversification. You got to have, it's a good practice to have a mix of your larger companies, some tech companies, some steady dividend paying companies just over the years. That's really when you look at it, because you want to be able to cover all bases of it. You want to be able to cover all aspects of it. So instead of trying to predict what's going to be the flavor this year or this month or today, you have a little bit of everything. You sprinkle in a little bit of everything. And just like there's a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL, but Patrick Mahomes is, they're not all created equal. The same thing when it comes to investments or investment strategies. There's a lot of different options out there, but all are not created equal. I always encourage anyone to look at something that's very, that fits their objectives and very customized towards them and what they're looking for. And asset allocation is a term we use to define what kind of investment overall you're going to have in your portfolio. Tech companies, dividend payers, U.S., multinational, the list goes on and on. The list goes on and on there. Bonds, international bonds. And so when you look at asset allocation, that's what we determine, okay, well, how much do you need to have in large companies? How much in small companies? How much international, how much U.S.? So that's what we help determine when we look at asset allocation. And they have these, right nowadays, for people starting investing, they have what's called asset allocation funds that really do that for you. So it takes some of your thought away from that. Because some people say, it's too much to get started. I don't know what to do, so you just do nothing. So they've created these asset allocation funds that make it just an easy way to just start the investment and to go in from there. And so you can just put in $50, $100, even $100,000 into what's called an asset allocation fund, and it will spread your money out according to that objective. So I don't want to go too much deeper into that. And again, at the end of it, if there's more questions about it, I'll be happy to address those questions for you. For the third bullet point here, portfolio rebalancing. Once you determine the asset allocation mix that you have and how aggressive or conservative you should be, now it's time to determine how often you should revisit that portfolio. I'm going to use an example. I'm not great at this, but I watched some people on YouTube, and I know some people who are really good at this. Have you ever watched someone who's great at smoking meat, smoking ribs? And they're a true master at smoking this. It's a long process. I mean, from the time of prepping them before, soaking them, seasoning them, and smoking them, it's a long process. But what they'll always tell you is you cook low and slow. And what I laugh about, what I heard is if you're having to look so often and flip it, you're not really smoking it. You're not letting it do its job. So you have to have some discipline and trust. You have to have some discipline and really trust in the process to know that the low and slow is working for you, and that you'll have these periods of time that you're going to check on them. But in the middle of those, let the meat cook, let the meat smoke. And that's what really, when you look at rebalancing, it really comes down to trusting that process and making sure that the investment allocation that you chose for yourself is appropriate. It's something that was designed for you. It's something your risk tolerance was taken into consideration, your time horizon was taken into consideration. So we really like to focus on that low and slow process. So again, it's like smoking your meat. We have our points we check in sometimes 2-3 times a year, and the portfolio is reviewed, rebalanced. And then aside from that, we know markets are going to be volatile. We know it's going to happen. It's normal, like I said earlier. So the idea of that is, my investment philosophy is low and slow process. Let the meat cook. Let your investment do what it's supposed to do, even in the midst of ups and downs times. And sometimes there will be causes for major changes. Again, you look at those significant events like the 9/11, financial crisis, COVID, inflation. Adjustments are made in those points. So it's not to say there's never adjustments made, but the idea of it is that those are rare and unique moments that we look at that make time change like that, or make the investment change. So slow and steady, low and slow at 225, let it cook. So that's dealing with portfolio rebalancing. This is the last slide I'm going to cover here, and then we'll open up for some questions and answers at the end of this, if there are any, or again, sending an email. So as we finish off this year, we've talked about this as we plan for next year. We really want to focus on the importance of goal setting. Now, I will start by saying I'm not a huge fan of New Year's resolutions. And the reason why I'm not is I feel like sometimes those are just fatty, or they're temporary, or they're not necessarily may not be there to stay. And some of them work, so I'm not gonna say don't do it, but just for me, they seem a bit cliche. And the gym's always busy in January, and then it gets a little slower in February, and by March it's back to the normal good old faithfuls who are in the gym. I've done that many times. But it's still very important to make financial goals. It's very important to sit down and know what you want for yourself. And I always say, when it comes to goal setting, making them SMART is really the way to go. And I know SMART is it's a crazy way of saying it, but it's a really powerful acronym. SMART, and that S really means specific. Making that goal very specific to what you want. The worst thing you can do is start a goal and not have it in mind of what you're looking for, or not have it well defined. So you want to make sure it's well defined for what you're looking for, as specific as possible. Next part is making it measurable. It's something that you want to be able to measure your progress. You want to be able to see how well you're doing. If it's that paying off your credit card debt, or if it's saving up for a house, you want to be able to look at your bank account and see, okay, I have this much money accumulated. I started here and now I'm here. Or debt, I started here and now I'm here. So you want to make sure it's a measurable goal. You also want to make sure it's attainable. Achievable. Sometimes we get excited and we make these high, lofty goals and shoot for the moon and you reach the stars and these different things. But that can also be very deflating if you make a goal that's not achievable, and you look, a month from now, 3 months from now, or a week or 3 weeks, however long, and you realize that goal is nowhere near accomplished, and not even seeming like something you can do, which goes into the next part of it being realistic. If someone has some health challenges, and like myself, I haven't always made the most healthy of choices. And so I have to set a realistic goal for myself if I want to lose weight. If I really want to experience weight loss, it has to be realistic, because if it's not, like all the other times, I ended up quitting on that and just said, forget it. I'm going to enjoy this pizza or enjoy this donut. So make sure it's realistic for you. And the last thing is time-based. So give it 3 months, 6 months, a year, but something to where, again, you have it in time of that. You have an end goal. And again, that's just, it's psychological, because it now keeps you motivated. You know what you're working towards. Someone who said, I just want to start saving money, or I just want to do better financially. That's good, but dig deeper on that. What does that mean to you? What does that ultimately mean? So you really want to focus in or hone in on what is I want to just do better financially. Let's hone in on that. Don't stop there. Dig a little deeper, okay? So the next bullet point is going to be creating a budget for the new year. And I would say budget setting is just really important to do, because it's so funny when you look at what you've done. And again, for those nuts like myself who really dig on your budget, you look at some of the things you spend your money on, and you're realizing how much money. It's always easy to track the major expenses. It's always very easy to track your mortgage, your rent, house, your car notes, things like that. But what about those other pesky subscriptions that we forget about? The $16.99 to Apple, or even like right now, how many of us have Netflix, Hulu, Cinemax, Paramount? You have all these different subscriptions, and they're thinking, oh, it's just $9.99, it's just $12.99, $19.99, not realizing you're paying about 3 times for cable. Internet's another one. I mean, you pay for internet on your phone, you pay for internet at home, pay for internet if you have a business at your office, you pay for internet everywhere you go. And now, even if you have, now even having kids, you sit there and paying for their internet and paying for their services. So you just want to look at where all your money is going. It's really important to know that. And those little things do add up. So even myself, knowing better, and this is what I do, just realize I fell victim to the subscriptions. I just went through my expenses with my wife about a few weeks ago, and I realized, wow, I am spending $50 a month on subscriptions that I don't even use anymore. And we haven't used them in about a year. That's $600. And depending on where your life is, $600 is a lot. It can be enough, but it can go to my kids' education. It can go to a savings account. It can be a trip. It can be a weekend away. It can be whatever you want it to be, other than paying it to a vendor that I no longer use. So that's the importance of really going through your budget and realizing that. The one thing I will say when creating a budget, again, we get excited, we do these things, and we want to be really strict on that budget. But give yourself some room so you don't feel strapped. You don't want to feel like you're in a straitjacket on your budget. Because what will happen is you'll go through it for a little bit, and all of a sudden you'll be like, I just need to spend money. I want to, and spending money sometimes can be emotional. It's how we cope with certain things. It's how we deal with certain problems. And so, you want to make sure that you are giving yourself a realistic picture of a realistic expectation on how you spend your money. It's okay, if you want to go shopping or do some shopping, build that into your budget so it doesn't just happen sporadically or uncontrollably. So that's the important piece of when you look at your budget, do not strap yourself so thin to where you can't even enjoy life, because it is a balance. It's about still being able to live and have a quality of life. Now, when you also look at your budget, again, keeping track of all those big expenses are easy, but it's now the variable expenses are the things that you want to look at. Your gas, electricity bill, food, groceries, eating out. And now the fun things are going to be looking at, like, okay, entertainment. Looking at, I call them budget killers, the Targets, the Walmarts, the Costco's, the Amazon. It's so easy to spend over your budget in these places. Costco is an easy one to do. Target, Walmart, they have these drive up and the apps make it very easy to do those things too. And they don't have minimums. Instacart, that's an easy one. You want some food, don't want to go anywhere, you can Instacart it. They're charging these high fees, but yet still, there's now more we're paying for convenience. And those are budget killers. So you really want to look at those things. I always say, you ever wonder, you go to the store and they have those little tchotchkes in front near the register while you're sitting there waiting in line, and you start picking them up. And those are budget killers. You go in there with a certain thing in mind, and you spend $3, $6, $10. All those things just add up. One trip to Target for $20 doesn't kill you, but 10 trips to Target for $20 now become, have a substantial difference. So keep that in mind when it comes to that, when it comes to budget killers. I'll speed through these last two, we're running out of time here, but building and maintaining an emergency fund is just really a really important piece of it. You want to have the idea of the emergency fund is really, you want to have that adequate amount of money in place for an emergency. General rule of thumb is 6 to 12 months of fixed expenses. So if something happens, you lose your job, you're unable to work for whatever reason, you want to have some emergency money in place. It's not really designed to make money for you. I know some people say, oh, interest rates are low, but that money is really for liquidity is the purpose of it. It's not necessarily designed to make you money. You have other instruments designed really for making money. That's just designed to help get you past an emergency. So, and I would say you can't build an emergency fund all at once. It's strategic. You should always be working towards building that emergency fund little by little, putting in $100 a month, $50 a month, 200, 500 bucks a month, whatever the amount is, just to help build that emergency fund up. And you can do that in conjunction with your retirement account, with all those different things, but it's just a matter of where you focus. As you reach your goal, then you could, after you get your goal, then you can increase your retirement contributions. But in the meantime, you can have them going tandem. I would just focus more on the emergency fund, or focus more on the emergency fund. And then, once that's accomplished, then at that point, you can really pivot over to increasing that amount over there. Last thing, insurance coverages. There's, life insurance, there's auto, property casualty insurance, all different kind of things. That's really just a foundation of financial planning. You want to make sure you have the right insurances in place. In the event something happens to you, it's preparing for the unexpected. And you always want to make sure that you have those insurance coverages in place and you're ready for, I can't say whatever, but you're ready for some of the things that are most likely to happen. We know all of us, we're all liable to death. We just don't know when. So having life insurance for your family, it just makes sense. It's just a foundation piece of it. Having, again, appropriate health insurance. If you drive a car, having auto insurance. These are just things that these are preparing for whatever, because not having them can be disastrous to any financial plan going to the new year. And so this is just a good foundational piece of that. So I'm going to stop there. I know we're approaching our time. And I know we have a few minutes for any questions and answers. And so if there's a question, definitely feel free to send an email or to unmute yourself. Otherwise, we're going to really pivot to as we conclude our time here. I'm just thinking, is there anything I didn't cover in that time? And I'm going to put my email on the screen so you have that in the event that you don't, in the event you want to check in later. You can also go to our website, resilientwealthmanagement.com. Going from there, and then our phone number, which I don't see on the slide, but I'll give it. It's 559-323-5555. Perfect. So what we're going to do at this point, again, we have all our links on here: Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And I believe we're also working on a YouTube page here soon. But these are things you can always follow us on. And I encourage you to follow us on those, get more information, get more tips. We're probably going to chop some of this up and put it on those different pages, or put it on our socials and different segments of it. Thanks for tuning in. We'll have more in the future. Again, this is my first one. So, all right, you guys, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, there's a question. 3 questions. Okay. So before I sign up, sorry about this. Okay. So, okay. In your 20s, what kind of investing should I focus my efforts to? In your 20s, your investments really, it's your objective. Especially in your 20s, the beauty of it is you really have a long road, especially focused on retirement. Retirement is the part I think you should really start on, and you can make minimal contributions to retirement plans. But also too, because you're in your 20s, life is going to happen. It's going to be very fluid. So one of the areas in that is combining your retirement plan, which maybe you start off small in there, but then focusing a lot on keeping life flexible. So, sometimes people want to buy a house. That may be an objective. Or sometimes someone may want to plan for a family. That may be another objective. In your 20s, typically, you're finding your career path and where you're going to go. So I always say in your 20s, focusing on, generally speaking, focusing on something dealing with retirement is one way. Again, a small piece of it towards retirement because you have a long window, but also focusing a lot on more the midterm, 3 to 5 years. So you're not locking in longer term because you want to keep that money flexible for those different objectives that may come. And also your mindset will change as time goes on. So great question on that one. Another question is, I don't know where to start investing. Is Acorn a great way to start doing it? I believe that's a really good option. They have apps that make it easy. They make it easy for people who are very app friendly, self-sufficient to start investing. I think you could start even investing in partial shares in there. So again, if you want to start with $50 or $100, you can buy a partial share of Apple there. And it's just a great way to get going at the end of the day. It's psychology, it's just a mindset. You want to get into the habit of saving money or putting money away every month. It's not necessarily, I wouldn't focus on where to invest it, but focus more on the idea of it. And I always say, instead of trying to look at a particular fund or a particular stock, I like the idea of looking at or having a general overview of looking at like a mutual fund or ETF that has a broader focus and not so narrow. The S&P 500 ETF is a great way to start, or a mutual fund is a great way to start. It just covers everything that you can be thinking of, and you're not having to think about or get paralyzed by the individual investment itself. Great question. Last one is, I have not started saving for retirement. Is it too late? Even though I'm in my 40s? And the answer is, it's never too late to start saving for retirement. What happens is just like, it's a race. So what happens if you haven't saved up until now, the idea of it is that needs to become just more of a focus. It needs to become more of what you're going to put into there. So maybe at that point now you're making larger contributions to your retirement plan and focusing more on that. Or the idea of it is, if you enjoy what you do, you can plan to work a little bit longer. But either way, it's never too late to start. And that's one of the biggest things. I was a late bloomer, even though I knew better. I was a late starter when it came to even making sure I was maximizing my contribution to my retirement plan. And so now I'm in that, I start making the ground, and I'm doing it very aggressively, but it's never too late to start. So I encourage you to do that and just get started. Whether it's you're allocating 1%, 2%, 3%, whatever amount you can allocate to your retirement plan, just get started, and you'll see how much you can do every year. Make it a goal to increase it by 1% or 2% every year. It's just really, once you have the discipline, now it's maybe one less trip to Starbucks a week, one less time eating out, and then now you begin that habit of creating a saving strategy for yourself. So a great question on that one too. Okay, that's all the questions I have right now. Again, if there's more, feel free to ask those questions. It was great. Thanks for tuning in, and look forward to our next event.